Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Monday, August 26th, and this is episode 369 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you to everybody who's joining, whether it's audio podcast platforms or here on YouTube. Today, we're joined by special guest host of the Jake Asman Show, Jake Asman. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. How's it going, man?
Bubs, I'm doing great. Always fun to join you, and hopefully we get to talk about some winning football this year when it involves our football team.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully this is finally a tide is turning finally for the Jets. Stay healthy, win a lot of games, hopefully take home the division, get to playoffs, play home playoff game. That's what we're all hoping for. I think start there and go move on. But anyway, I wanted to start here with some just 53-man roster stuff, and then we'll get into a little bit of a season preview later on. Just wanted to start your overall thoughts on training camp, preseason, and where this roster stands ahead of cutdown day tomorrow afternoon, 4 Eastern.
Yeah, I think regardless what they do with the roster cuts, to me, it's the most talented team the Jets will go to war with since probably the 2010 team that went to their second straight AFC title game. You can go back even further than that if you wanted, but I think it's just a testament to how talented the roster is. The big takeaway from training camp for me, knock on wood, nothing changes between now and 2 weeks from tonight when they play week one, but they're healthy, right? I mean, the most difficult injury they're dealing with is Michael Carter, their stud nickel corner, and he should be ready for week one. So, to get through camp with Rodgers looking healthy, looking good the way he did, Tyron Smith being ready to roll, Morgan Moses, Olu Fashanu, this O-line being in peace with AVT now back, you feel way better now about that unit and just the Jets in general than we even did at this time a year ago.
Yeah, 100%. This time last year, he was still scrambling to find answers on the offensive line. Dwayne Brown practiced for like 2 days, and they're like, yeah, let's throw you in there. And it was, of course, a train wreck, 13 different combinations. To see everybody healthy, that's been the greatest part of it all. Biggest thing with this team, of course, is health. That's the biggest if. Now, I wanted to start with just some roster stuff. Running back and receiver, couple depth questions there. Do you feel they'll hold on to Izzy as a fourth running back? Did everything he could this preseason and training camp to make the roster, if not possibly lands with another team. And then, of course, sixth receiver spot. Your top five guys are a lock. Do they hold on to six, hold on to seven? Irv Charles, Brandon Smith, Jason Brownlee, all in the mix. How do you see those two positions shaping out by tomorrow afternoon?
Yeah, it's going to be tough to keep everyone. You have a lot of really good football players. It's a good problem to have. It's just you're not going to be able to keep everyone. I mean, there's probably 13 defensive linemen that deserve the opportunity to be on this team based on how they played. Look, I do think Izzy Abanikanda makes this team because of the position he plays. Running back is a high injury rate position. So if you go into the year with three and then something happens to Brees or one of the rookies, well, then you're scrambling to find a replacement when Izzy, I think, has done everything you could ask him to do. He scored 2 touchdowns. He averaged 6 yards a carry this preseason, no penalties, no drops. To me, he should be on the team. I guess I wouldn't be stunned if he's not. But I think you almost have to keep him because if you don't, it's not like you could stash him on the practice squad. I think he would get claimed.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I also think, too, from a Joe Douglas perspective, I find it hard to believe that he would move on from a guy that he just drafted last year, albeit in the 5th round, but feels like he's still going to want to give him a little bit more time and keep him on this roster despite everything they did in the running back room this year, bringing in Braden Allen and Isaiah Davis and even Tariq Cohen prior to, of course, his retirement. And then with the receivers, do you see them holding on to Irv Charles as a special teams piece? How much do they value that? Or do they value more of a receiver type guy and a Brandon Smith or a Jason Brownlee to fill out those final spots?
Yeah, for me, I don't think Irv Charles is enough of a dominant special teamer that I need to keep him. Now, would I be shocked if they did? Bubs, probably not. I mean, I know Brant Boyer, has a lot to say, so I think that would be his decision ultimately if they keep Irv Charles. But Quantez Stiggers has looked really good as the gunner in the preseason this summer as well. So if you need to find another roster spot, to me, it'd be very easy to only carry just 6 wide receivers and you cut Irv Charles.
Yeah, I agree. Who do you feel will fill out that? Is it Smith or Brownlee? How do you see that playing out for the 6th if Charles does move on?
It probably should be Smith based on performance, but I think they still like Brownlee, so maybe they'll try and stash Smith on the practice squad.
Yeah, definitely would be interesting. And then moving on to offensive line wise, of course, the starting 5 set. Love what you've seen out of all of them in training camp. Of course, if stayed healthy, Joe Tippmann got the snapping issues figured out, which is good to see. Olu's kind of your sixth man in a way off the bench there with working in at right tackle as well. You've also got Carter Warren. Some of the depth guys, there's not really too many questions, but how do you see the final two spots? Max Mitchell probably makes it, but Xavier Newman, you also got Jake Hansen, Cole Laval. How do you see the final 9 to 10 guys, if they do keep 10, shaping out up front?
I have them keeping 10, and I think it really probably comes down to those last couple spots being Xavier Newman versus, Jake Hansen. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's probably what it comes down to. I mean, the locks are Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, AVT, Joe Tippmann, John Simpson, Olu Fashanu, Max Mitchell, Wes Schweitzer, Carter Warren. And then after that, I think it's probably Newman, Hansen, throw Cole Laval in the mix as well. I think that's probably what it comes down to, but I have them keeping 10. So I think the names you said, I think we're in agreement as far as which players they're looking at there.
Yeah, definitely not too many questions there, which is a positive thing this time last year, of course, scrambling for answers. Now, I want to move over to the defense side of football before we shift back to offense later on to preview what to expect this season. Before we get to the 53, got to start with Hassan Reddick. Very just frustrating and annoying. Feels just like a same old Jets type of moment, especially when you see the Crosstown Giants go out and trade for Brian Burns early this offseason, get the extension done. Even Danielle Hunter, similar situation as well. It's just annoying. Everything has gone right this offseason. No real distractions. This is the one thing that has popped up. How do you see this situation getting resolved? If it does he play week 1? How do you see this end up finishing out or coming to a close where he shows up and is in a Jet uniform at some point this season, which is, of course, huge. Both sides, it feels, needs each other.
I think he shows up next week. I don't believe he plays week 1, but I think he could be back out there as early as week 2. I think he's sending a message. He's unhappy, this and that. But at the end of the day, he can't sit out the year and then think that's a good idea for his career. One, he's costing himself an enormous amount of money. He's already cost himself to this point close to $2 million in just fines alone. And then two, so you want to be paid. Okay, well, if the Jets aren't going to pay you, you need to still have a good year so someone will pay you next offseason. Someone will give you that contract you're coveting. So I think he's cutting off his nose to spite his face if he thinks that it's the best interest for him to not play. Like, I get it. He's annoyed. He probably should be paid more relative to his production, but he's not a free agent. He didn't have a huge market. And the Jets right now, even though, I agree with you, it's very same old Jet-like that we're in this spot, but I think the Jets have handled it from this point on with the right approach. Like, we have your rights, we have the leverage, and until you show up, we're not negotiating with you. So to me, he's going to show up. It's just a matter of if he shows up, let's say on Labor Day next week, Bubs, there's no way you could put him out there week 1. I think he would be showing up just to get his game check. And then maybe the earliest you would see him would be week 2 or that Thursday night home opener against New England in week 3.
Yeah, it's just very unfortunate. Yes, it's good to see the Jets, of course, holding their ground. It's also probably not a great look if they would give him a ton amount of money when you look at guys like Tyler Conklin, Michael Carter, even DJ Reed, other guys that have been here through losing, played well, and would look for new contracts at the end of this season once 2025 rolls around. But it's just, you hope that he probably doesn't play week 1. It's similar to Darrelle Revis entering day 35, where Revis, a little bit different, of course, being on the team, but you also hope injury factor, being in football shape. You go back to Revis, he ended up actually getting banged up a little bit early in that year, as many probably recall, after the long holdout. So just hope that comes back and plays a big role, potentially first sack on Thursday night at MetLife would definitely be a warm welcome to Jets fans if that does happen. Hopefully it does.
No doubt.
Yeah. Anyway, going back to moving on here more towards the defensive line, with Reddick's absence, a lot of edge pieces have stepped up in a big way. Tack McKinley, Brady McGregor, Eric Watts, even Jalen Holmes look pretty good. Tanzel Smart in the interior has been obviously still in the mix. Even Leonard Taylor. How do you see this room playing out? When I was making my 53-man roster yesterday, do you try to hold on to everybody? It's tough. Good position the Jets are in with all this talent. Haven't had this in a very long time. But how do you see that edge room, the defense line with McKinley and those guys all impressing in a really big way this preseason and training camp?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, right? I mean, we talked about it at the top. Just there's so many guys that are deserving. I mean, if Reddick doesn't show, that probably allows you to keep an extra guy for now. And then what do you do when he does show? Who loses their spot? Maybe like it's like a guy like Eric Watts, who's probably at the the end there for a chance to maybe make this team. But I mean, you have some obvious locks there, right? You start with Quinnen, Jermaine, then you look at McDonald, Lecky Fotu is on this team. I know Jet fans don't love Michael Clemens, but I think he's a lock. And then, after that, you got Kinlaw, of course, who was a free agent signing. But from there, like Tack McKinley needs to be on this team, in my opinion. He's earned a spot. Solomon Thomas is going to be on this team. He's earned his spot based on what he's done the last couple of years. From there, you got Leonard Taylor, who's had an unbelievable camp. This is a former 5-star guy who was thought to be maybe a top pick in round 1 or round 2 a few years ago. He goes undrafted, but you see the talents there. He's earned a spot. I think you got to keep him because if you try and put him on the practice squad, someone's going to claim him. It probably comes down to Eric Watts versus Brady McGregor. Both guys have earned the chance to be on the team. Maybe there's a way they could keep both depending on what happens with Reddick.
Yeah, definitely. Leonard Taylor is just feels like a steal, as you mentioned. Could have been a first-round pick, even early day 2 pick. Early in college, coming out of high school, of course, going to Miami, and now has turned into a UDFA steal, it feels, for the Jets, which Douglas has found some of those under-the-radar guys on defense that have played really, really big roles for this team in the past. One other thing on the defense really doesn't, other than the defensive line, it feels like the defensive roster side of things is pretty set, not too many competitions going on. But do you see Brandon Codrington making this roster as a 7th corner, but more of just a special teams ace? Of course, played really, really well with a couple nice returns on special teams against the Panthers.
It's going to be tough for him, right? I mean, if you're keeping 4 running backs, all of a sudden is that a spot that maybe would have went to Codrington? I don't think he makes the team. I would love it if they found a way to get him on the practice squad, but I think because he has shown with these new rules that he's a weapon with the kickoffs, someone might claim him. So that's the risk the Jets are going to run. You'd rather keep, I think, one of these defensive linemen than a guy who's really good on special teams, but it's still, to me, a lesser premium position than a potential edge rusher or defensive lineman would be.
All right, so moving on now back to the offense and to more of a season preview, second part of the show here. Once again, we're talking to Jake Asman, host of the Jake Asman Show here on YouTube. Of course, you start with Aaron Rodgers. What are your expectations for him this season? Coming off the torn Achilles, has looked very, very good in training camp, has looked good in the joint practices. Didn't play, of course, in the preseason game. Well, that's not really a big deal. Hall of Famer, I think. What are your realistic expectations? Are you more of MVP Rodgers returns, a little bit less than that? Where do you stand on what you want to see this season from Rodgers and this offense?
If he is average, I think they're a 10-win team. I think he's going to be better than that for reference, because I do think he's still capable of being a top 10 quarterback. I think he is certainly going to be a top 12 quarterback. Look, is he going to win the MVP this year? I probably wouldn't bet on that, because I do think this offense is going to be run heavy. They're going to rely on Brees, and they should, because I think Brees could be what, Terrell Davis was the John Elway at the end of his Hall of Fame career. So I do think, though, when the game is on the line, you're going to have all the faith in the world Rodgers is going to get it done. I think he's going to look like a guy on a mission at times this year. I think he's going to look like a guy who will play at times like an MVP. I just don't think they're going to ask him to do that. So I think he'll be in the top 10. I think he'll have a chance of breaking every single season Jet statistic from yards or touchdowns. Not saying much, but still, yeah. All due respect to Broadway Joe, yeah. I'm wearing the T-shirt right now. The fact that only one Jet quarterback has thrown for 4,000 yards and it was in a 14-game season is not the best look for the Jet history at the quarterback spot, as we know. Yeah. So I think Aaron could throw close to 4,000 yards, if not more, and I think he could beat Fitzpatrick's touchdown record and throw at least 32 touchdowns. I don't think that's crazy. If he's under those numbers, it doesn't necessarily mean he was bad or he got hurt. It might be because they're managing the game and Brees is just dominating. So I think there's a lot of paths for Aaron Rodgers to still be a top 10 quarterback, even if statistically maybe he's not, top 5 in yards and touchdown throws and all that.
Yeah, I still think people don't quite understand, not so much Jets fans, but just NFL fans in general, don't quite understand what the Jets have dealt with at quarterback the last couple seasons and how much of a difference, even like you said, an average Aaron Rodgers will make for this team. And yeah, I mean, nothing against Ryan Fitzpatrick, but seeing his name atop the touchdowns list is not exactly a good look for the Jets. And that's something that needs to end. Of course, 9 years is way too long since that record was held, of course, in 2015. Now, you talk about Brees Hall, Garrett Wilson. You expect big season from him, potentially breaking Brandon Marshall's yards and receptions record. What are you expecting from those two guys, the two-headed monster on this offense? I mean, Brees, it feels like he's already entered kind of CMC category last year, right behind him with 1,585 all-purpose yards, second among running backs. That was also with an offensive coordinator that didn't know he was a threat in the receiving game until halfway through the season. Brees, it feels like statistically is going to just dominate. And then Garrett Wilson has put up back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, first since Keyshawn Johnson with no quarterback play. How much of a big year statistically do you think those two guys will end up in at the end of this all?
Yeah, I think you nailed it, Bubs. I mean, I think Garrett Wilson could break every record. We talked about Rodgers doing that, but Brandon Marshall's record, I think, is in play this year for yards and for catches. I mean, I've been at camp 4 or 5 times this summer, and like the best player on the field, and basically every practice I have been at has been Garrett Wilson. I mean, he's on a different level, and I think it's just another sign of just how bad the Jet quarterback situation has been. That Garrett's best practice this summer was arguably that joint practice against the Commanders. They held Aaron out because of the weather. It was a monsoon that day in Florham Park, and Tyrod Taylor got him the ball, and Garrett did what he did. I mean, it's just like this guy is special. For him to put up 2 1,000-yard seasons with the 8 different trash quarterbacks essentially that were throwing to him the last 2 years, it's amazing. So I pray to the football gods he's healthy for 17 regular season games. Same with Aaron, because those two are going to be special. And then with Brees, I mean, this guy last year was second in the NFL among running backs in yards from scrimmage. Number 1 was Christian McCaffrey. He has an elite O-line, an elite offensive coach, really good quarterback. Brees Hall had the worst quarterback room in football. Brees Hall had 13 O-line combinations in 17 games. Nate Hackett, as his OC, who admitted he didn't realize how good Brees was as a receiver out of the backfield till after that Giant game. He was on a reps count at the beginning of the year, coming off injury. Like all these things, yet Brees still dominated. There's a reason why. I know people who are taking Brees first overall in their fantasy drafts this year. I got a draft Thursday night. I'm picking third. I might not be able to get Brees. He might be gone by then. So I'm bullish on him. I would bet every single prop bet over for him because, as I alluded to earlier in our chat, I think he could be the Terrell Davis to John Elway. I think he could be that to Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career.
Yeah, Brees Hall fantasy numbers are certainly, I mean, if you get him and pick 3, I think that's great value. Of course, Bijan's also in that conversation. CMC's, of course, also up there for fantasy terms. But yeah, Brees is going to be huge this season as well as Garrett Wilson. And then just quickly, the rest of the receiving room before we move on to the offensive line and defense. How much faith do you have Mike Williams coming off the torn ACL? Really, really good number 2 to Keenan Allen all those years with the Chargers. A guy that's, of course, a kind of a 70-30, 80-20 guy when it comes to the one-on-one balls. And then Corley, Gibson, and even Lazard, what kind of faith, I guess, do you have in him that he could bounce back more focused with Rodgers, who, of course, he had some success with in Green Bay?
I'm not banking on Lazard to ever kind of live up to his contract, but do I think he could be a 3 or a 4 on this team with Aaron throwing to him? I think that's fair. He's going to have some drops that are going to drive us crazy, I'm sure, but he's also made some nice plays this summer. So he seems like he's rejuvenated. I know he's technically under contract for another year, but his contract after this year is not guaranteed. The Jets are not going to pay him what he's being paid in all likelihood. So he's essentially in a walk year. So go out there with Aaron back, play well. I think he feels like he let the Jets down last year a little bit. I think he wants to help Aaron kind of ride out maybe his final year in the league, maybe a year or 2, still playing at a high level. So I think internally he's motivated, which is good. I'm not banking on him to do much, but I think he could be a competent 3 or 4. And as far as Gibson, I like Xavier Gibson a lot. I think he's going to have a bigger role than some realize early. And then, potentially as the year goes on, as Malachi Corley starts to get integrated into the offense more, maybe that comes at the expense of Xavier Gibson, but he's going to play, he's going to start, and I think he's going to have a role on this team, especially early.
Yeah, Lazard in the practice I've been to looks a lot more focused. The drops are going to be there. Like you said, there's going to be drops where you want to pull your hair out. It's just going to happen. Even that he kind of dealt with some of that in Green Bay as well. A little bit more focused here just because of what happened last year. But you look at the offensive line. I mean, how good can this unit be, you feel? You go back to, of course, the Rex days. The offensive line, of course, was a strength. You feel it to be that good? I mean, they look great so far. You got a Hall of Famer protecting a Hall of Famer's blind side. Where do you feel the expectation and the possibilities for this offensive line can be?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when it comes to the O-line, if you guarantee me health for the most part, right? Yeah, they could be a top 5 offensive line. They really can be. I mean, you got a Hall of Fame left tackle who was second team All-Pro last year. Look, Tyron Smith's not playing 17 games. Last year he played 13 though and was still second team all pro. You know how good you have to be on the all pro team if you only play that many games. So it's a testament to his greatness. John Simpson, I think, is maybe one of their more underrated moves they made. They replaced Laken Tomlinson, who was a terrible, terrible free agent signing, with a guy in Simpson who I have not heard his name called at all this summer, which is a good thing. And he's going up against, Quinnen Williams and Javon Kinlaw a lot of times. So I think Simpson is underrated. He's a solid, competent left guard. Joe Tippmann, I think, is a average to above average center now in year 2. I think he'll get better as the year goes on. AVT, got to stay healthy, but he's at his natural position now. I think he's an all-pro caliber guard. And Morgan Moses, I don't need to tell you, Bubs, or any Jet fan, we know he's good. We saw it a few years ago. He never should have left. So getting him at right tackle to solidify that is incredibly encouraging. Plus, the fact that Olu Fashanu has looked the way he has at both left and now right tackle being cross-trained there, you're not screwed if there's an injury. Now, you don't want an injury, and I think Olu's going to play at some point, but at least you feel comfortable with him coming in and being able to at least be average as a rookie and then eventually take over a long term. So long answer to your question, but I'm very optimistic about this O-line. It has a chance to maybe be their best since 15, if not 2010.
Yeah, totally. And glad you brought up Olu. It's great to see Morgan Moses, Tyron Smith, all those guys teaching up the young guys, Olu absorbing all that knowledge, even Carter Warren as well, to build kind of a foundation for the future with ideally your future left tackle in the 11th overall pick this year. Now you move on to the defense. Of course, an elite unit the last 2 seasons. You look for that to continue this year. What are your expectations for, the defensive line, even, linebackers and just as a whole to continue what they've done? And even this season, finally, hopefully, get the ability to play with a lead, which we saw a glimpse of last year in that Houston Texans blowout where they just made CJ Stroud look like he was lost, which not many teams were able to do in his rookie campaign last year. Defense with a lead, actual offense, expectations.
Be the best in the league, right? I mean, they have that type of talent. If they get Reddick back, then I think they really can be the best defense in football. Look, you nailed it. Playing with a lead. This team was on the field more than any defense last year. Think about how good the Jets defense was, that they led the NFL against the pass, right? They allowed the least amount of passing yards per game, yet they were on the field longer than any team defensively. That's incredible. So you look at the opportunity to rush the quarterback with a lead where teams aren't just going to try and run out the clock against you or go out there and dink and dunk, because why would they take chances downfield if they're up? They're not going to throw on Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed or Michael Carter. Why would you? So that changes this year, and they're going to force more turnovers. They're going to be able to close out games like what we saw briefly in that Texans game you alluded to, or even the Denver game where they closed it out at the end against Russell Wilson. That's what I'm expecting to see from this defense. Hopefully they stay healthy, because the one thing people forget, while the Jets have been decimated by injuries on offense, the defense has been relatively healthy. So hopefully we're knocking on all the wood I could find here that, that both units stay as relatively healthy as possible, because that's key. And I still think getting Reddick back is going to be very important, but even without him, they still should be a top 5 defense.
Moving on to one of the final parts here, and one of, I guess, the only real concern with this team other than injuries creeping into it would be the coaching staff. Of course, Robert Saleh probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rodgers. Gets a chance now to actually get a healthy Hall of Famer at quarterback, which he hasn't had, of course, for the first 3 seasons. So you got to give him a chance. I guess some of the portion of the fan base believes that. Portion of it still believes he should have been gone. Of course, Nate Hackett. Defensive side of the coaching staff, you love Ulbrich, what he's done. Saleh as well. It's had his hands, of course, on a top 5 defense. How much of a concern do you think the coaching staff really is? Even from an offensive perspective, it feels like Rodgers with Hackett, he's going to give him the play. What he sees at the line, he's going to make a change.
Yeah, I think Hackett is a concern, but he's not as big of a concern as maybe some make him out to be, right? Rodgers is calling the offense. He's doing what he wants. And also, I think they got better positional coaches around Nathaniel Hackett this year. People could poo-poo that. I think it matters. I think the Jets have looked a lot better as far as, operational, not with the pre-snap penalties. At least in the preseason, it looks like they're more organized in that respects. So I think that helps. But it's Aaron's offense, right? What he wants to do, he's going to do. I know people love to rip Robert Saleh, but, they won 7 games last year. And you look at the quarterbacks they won those games with. Zach Wilson's QB3 in Denver right now. Tim Boyle is the 4th quarterback in Houston, probably going to be cut and on their practice squad. And Trevor Siemian's out of the league. So, I know Robert Saleh is not perfect. He certainly needs to get better. I think he will get better. Can we at least see what the guy could do? with average quarterback play, let alone Aaron Rodgers, who might be top 10, right? Like they're not that far away from being good if he finally is blessed with quarterback play that's not putrid, like objectively the worst in the league by far. People, you said it best, Bubs. I don't think people realize just how bad it was, not just last year, but especially last year, but the previous couple of years at that quarterback spot.
I think what really made me realize how bad it was, not even just from watching every single game from, for many years now, and of course even just last year, but seeing Tim Boyle play in the Hall of Fame game, I think was a real kind of like, I don't know, I don't know how to word it, but kind of a real like wake up call. Like, wow, that was bad. Seeing him play in the Hall of Fame game, and he was starting games for the New York Jets last season. So, see what they can do to close things out here quickly before we let you go. Record prediction, and then also week 1 prediction as they head into San Fran 14 days from now.
Record prediction, I'm sticking with my 12-5 AFC East champions. People will say, well, where are the 5 losses coming from? I do, as of now, have them losing Monday night, but I want to make this clear. I'm changing my record to 13-4 if Trent Williams, Ayuk, and McCaffrey don't play. McCaffrey's still hurt as of this point. Williams holding out, Ayuk holding in. So subject to change, but I think we're gonna have a great year. I think 12-5 AFC East champions. I think this team has a legitimate chance to go on a deep playoff run. So I am optimistic. I am cautiously optimistic because I really do believe in the talent on this team. The biggest thing though is they're the Jets, as we all know. So they have to get by the stigma that is being the Jets. But if they could survive that, they should be a hell of a football team.
I think what most people have said is playoff beers at MetLife. That's the goal this season. So we'll see if it happens.
Here's to that. Can you drink, Bubs? You're not 21.
No,
I won't tell anyone.
It'll be playoff water or whatever it might be at MetLife.
No,
anyway,
I got you. Playoff water. I got you.
Yeah. Anyway, awesome having you on. Always love talking to you. Tell everybody where they can find all your work. Obviously, ESPN Radio, all that great stuff, and then here on YouTube as well.
Yeah, you basically nailed it. So I'm on YouTube every day talking about the Jets and all things NFL. And you can catch me on ESPN New York and on Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio.
Yep, sounds good. Definitely check them out. We'll be back with a lot more content coming your way. We'll have a reaction from the official 53 tomorrow. Another set of player previews on Wednesday. Season is here. And until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.